and then really what thought-provoking questions we can ask those that we're here on this planet Earth to serve, because it really challenges people's mindsets. And a lot of people have different definitions of leadership, but I believe one of them is getting people to think differently, helping them think so they get what they want when they want it, and not just telling them what to do, but it's getting them to think.
Designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and our esteemed guest today is Jake Dixon. Jake is the founder of The Locker Room, which I love. How the heck did you come up with that name for a coaching program?
Yeah, man. So for me, it's a symbolic name because I'm a sports nut. I played college and professional baseball. And so for me, it was just a symbolic thing where the blood, sweat, and tears and things like that are established. And my tagline is real estate's a contact sport. Are you ready to get your jersey dirty? So that's really where it was born, man. And now it's just taken on a whole different life form.
Oh, I love that. I got a bunch of buddies that are ex-baseball players, both, real good high school players, obviously, but guys that went on and played college and or pros. And the guys in the baseball world will know this term, but they like to be called dirt bags, and guys that are, just get your jersey dirty is kind of.
I've been called worse.
So what was your position? This has nothing to do with real estate, but what was your position?
No, that's okay. So I was a pitcher actually through college, though. I played first base as well. So I got drafted out of high school as a hitter is what they wanted me for. I turned that down to go to college instead. And then my junior year of college, I got drafted as a pitcher.
Awesome. That's really cool. What an extraordinary kind of upbringing in the baseball world. The thing I like about baseball is it's a sport that you really have to grind away at, and it's a lot like life. It's a lot like business. And so how did you get from your being a realtor to now being a coach? And the way that we talked about as we prep for our podcast here is that you operate a community of real estate coaches, 100 coaches nationwide that are coaching over 2,000 agents nationwide in the real estate industry. And so how did that all come about? Let's talk about your start briefly and then how you got into coaching and what that looks like.
Yeah, so, baseball is a big part of that coaching background, and that will be something I share here after a bit. But I started in real estate actually after my professional baseball playing days were done. I had to hang up the cleats because of an reoccurring arm injury. And so I started actually down in Jacksonville, Florida, St. Augustine area with Lennar Homes, a national home builder. And I did that for 3 years. So that was my first exposure to the real estate world, if you will. To make a long story short, I'm originally from Illinois. So started to kind of wonder and miss family and whatnot. And so I moved back home to Illinois to start my own indoor baseball training facility where I would give kids, lessons and clinics and things of that nature. And so when I was doing that, I got the itch because I like variety and I'm a high I type personality where it's like, oh, so there's a squirrel, and so I need to mix things up. And so I just went and got my real estate license just to do it on the side part-time and dabble in it. Well, like most entrepreneurs, I don't know how to go half-ass at anything. So I went all in while I was still running my baseball business and found quick success with the local company that I aligned myself with and ended up getting the call from the owner to interview for what they call the team leader position, which is more or less like the CEO of the office. I'm like, dude, I'm the new guy, like why would you call upon me for that? But ended up doing that and went down the leadership route inside this organization. And that's really where I self-discovered that my passion was not just growing the business, but really pouring into other people and helping them grow their businesses and living that life of significance. So that's where I just decided to roll up the sleeves and get in the trenches. And what better way than to be a coach with individual real estate agents. And since then, it's just kind of morphed into really expanding our coaching organization where we've built systems and models and tools that we all collaborate together to create to in turn use with our coaching clients.
It's interesting, Jake. You talk about being an athlete yourself and then running a baseball, basically academy, where you're helping kids learn to excel in the sport that you love, and you've got that mutual love. And I find it so interesting, and there's probably lots of psychological studies of the correlation between folks that really succeeded, athletes that succeeded at a high level, and that ability to succeed at a high level in business, because there's so many crossovers with just teamwork, but then also your own self-worth and this, striking out. I mean, that happens on a daily basis in business. And the cool thing about baseball is, you've always got the next at bat coming up. And so it's kind of like dust yourself off, figure out, make that course correction, calibrate what went wrong there, and then fix it. So there's just such a correlation between people who've been successful in sports and then also in industry. And I think that's probably served you very well. One of the things that you mentioned to me is that you've got kind of this island of misfit toys, if you will, this tribe of misfits that you call your group that you work with. And let's talk about that in more detail, what that means like for you at the locker room, and what the people that you're typically coaching are like, and then also just what you're trying to do to maybe debunk some myths about the coaching industry as it relates to real estate.
Yeah, man, that's a big question. I want to go back just one thing when you were talking about baseball specifically in sports. I 100% agree with you, because baseball to me is very special because it's a game of failure. It teaches us how to accept defeat and adversity and things, where the best of the best are in the Hall of Fame when they succeed 3 out of 10 times. I mean, that's crazy, right? And not to mention but it's a game of fundamentals. And that's where I always apply. I'm in this day and age of technology and artificial intelligence and all this crazy stuff. I just keep things simplified, because what I've found is people they make things more complicated than it is. And then they hide behind that complexity and say, see, I told you so. Like, they look for the evidence to justify why they're not taking the necessary actions and things to be successful. And so that's why I love that. And so you bring up the tribe of misfits. I choose to align myself with people who have similar values and belief systems. And there was a quote by Simon Sinek who said something to the effect of, the goal in business is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have, but the goal in business is to do business with those who believe what you believe. And that's really where we've prided ourselves as the tribe of misfits, as real estate coaches who just come together, man. And we're on this mission to just simply serve other people, put their interests before our own, and not overcomplicate things that don't need to be overly complicated. And so with that being said, I mean, that really sets the tone for the blue ocean that I was telling you about in our pre-interview. And really what separates the locker room, there's a lot of great coaching organizations out there, and I have tremendous respect for all of them. And yet the one thing that, as I'm peeling back the layers and seeing how are we going to stand out, how would we be the purple cow in the coaching world, there was a book that had a lasting impression on me that's called Blue Ocean Strategy. I would highly recommend anybody listening to this, check out that book. And so what it helped me realize was, out of NAR, let's say there's 1.3 million realtors in NAR, okay? Look backwards, in last year, there was only 3%, AKA about 43,000 realtors who sold 25 or more homes. And so what that means is there's 97% of people who make up NAR who sold 24 or fewer homes. So really where the locker room's passion is by getting in the trench, serving the individual agent, maybe the brand new agent who's just trying to, paddle and keep their head above surface, and have a fighting chance at this industry, because you and I both know this is tough, man. This is hard. It's not HGTV. And so while there's other organizations out there who compete for the 3%, the red ocean, we're over here saying, what about these folks? The 8 or 9 out of 10 people who fail in this industry within their first 2 years because they didn't get the proper training or accountability to succeed. And so that, in a nutshell, is really where we find our real passion.
I like that. You're serving the greater good. And you talked about Blue Ocean Strategy. For those of you who haven't read it, you can kind of preview the book. One of my favorite podcasts, and this is an endorsement for a podcast that I love, and I've met several of the people involved in the Entre Leadership podcast. Episode 231, which was November 5th, 2017. Renee, and I'm going to butcher her last name, but Mauborgne, Mauborgne. Renee Mauborgne talks about her book, Blue Ocean Strategy, and the episode's called Move Beyond Competing. And I love that you say, look, we're going to serve the greater good. There's so many people fighting over that red ocean of, the sharks, this dog eat dog world, or it's a Shark Tank of everybody's competing for this very small sliver of the industry. And I agree with you. One of the things that I find very discouraging is that a lot of masterminds, which has become a very watered down term in our business, and a lot of just real estate conferences are focused on elite performers. Yep. And while that is good, and I think it is good for, chiefs to get together, I think that that's really important, that you want to have top performers get together. There is a far greater I think need for quality mentoring for someone that is new, someone that's stuck, someone that's struggling to basically work through it. And if you're anything like me, I'm sure you are, I have had countless mentors that have spent time with me that they didn't have to, because they knew that if I could get unstuck from that moment, I would fly. And I think that that's really admirable that you're focusing on not having it be the elite performers. And I'm sure that they're welcome if someone wants to work with you, but I would imagine your cost structure is probably a little bit different too, because of the fact that you're trying to clearly get your message out to the masses. So what does the locker room look like tactically? Like, what does it look like if someone enrolls in the program, and what does it look like on a day-to-day or monthly basis on how they might get coaching? Because there's a lot of coaching programs out there. And to give credit where credit's due, I got introduced to you by Wayne Salmons, and Wayne has his own coaching program, and there's others out there. And so what does yours look like, and what's your differentiation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so really the way we run our organization is we take on people that we align with, like I said earlier, and we give them the creative freedom. So a lot of coaching companies, for example, they put you in a one-size-fits-all box of here's our packages and our pricing models and things like that. And that's not us. So yes, we have a threshold that they can't go below. There's some parameters in place, but we want the coaches to run their own coaching business. They're able to brand it the way they want to brand it. It's just ... powered by the locker room. So with that being said, there's not a one-size-fits-all package, because each coach gets to decide how much they want to charge per month and how the frequency of one-on-one or group coaching sessions and things like that. And we just provide the platform of tools for them and their clients to succeed. So naturally, part of that, we're getting ready to release our first version of CORE, which stands for Center of Real Estate. That is our locker room software, because I'm a massive proponent in anything worth doing, any metric, you have to pay attention to it. You have to track it. And so it's a combination of a tracking system that makes numbers sexy and interesting again, with an accountability function to it. And really what we're doing in version 2.0 coming up in the next several months is creating a real estate game. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, there's nothing by my research that is a real estate game where we'll have daily quests and challenges and people can level up and it resets each month, almost like a Candy Crush type experience to just bring the fun factor back into this business, where otherwise it gets so stuffy and like, oh, what are your conversion rates and how many contacts a day are you making? Dude, all that's important and I coach to that, but we're going to bring the fun factor in. So people get access to the core software. We have the Locker Room University, which is our online video module where all of us coaches shoot these training courses and mastery classes that people can go on demand and watch. We also have our agent and coaches toolkits, which are downloadable resources, exclusive Facebook groups, you name it. But to kind of answer your question, the coaches are given the freedom to run their business the way they want to. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all pricing model as far as that's concerned.
Good. And this game that you're describing, I can picture this will date me, but this is kind of like the Legend of Zelda, right? Where you've got, the hero in the story is the agent, and they've got daily quests and they've got different power-ups, and they've got to go, get, the magic potion or the elixir from, some sage. They've got to, basically, or, Mario Brothers, you got to go rescue the princess, right? So
it honestly is we're taking a lot of features from that and making this game, and it's going to be really cool. Fascinating. We've got an achievement program that's interwoven in there that we call the K Club and the Six Figure Club. So it's going to be pretty wild, man. I can't wait.
That's cool. And I'm imagining that that's probably an app or something built into your website that you're coaching clients. So that's really cool. And it probably gives you great data to then create even better programs for as you get all the stats and everything like that.
You got it. Exactly. Yeah.
Coaching is so much. It's funny. We both have kids. You've got a wife and 2 kids. I have a wife and 3 kids. Our kids are all elementary school age, twins that are 2nd graders and a 3rd grader. You've got pre-K aged kids. And I will tell you, from the education standpoint, education is very aligned with coaching. A lot of what I see in the education space in elementary schools is exactly what you're talking about. My kids have this app that's called Reflex Math that they have to log in a certain amount of times per week and do Reflex Math, and it makes math a game. And, I remember, again, dating me here, the Oregon Trail, where you're like sitting here in computer class and you're like, there's different tests and different trials, and it makes learning fun is the whole point. Learning needs to be fun. And I think so many people think like, oh, we got to do our CE, our continuing education, or we got to do our ethics class, and this is going to be boring and crusty and crackly. And really, it shouldn't be that way. Learning should be a lot of fun.
Well, they say, your business should be a reflection of who you are. And so you had asked earlier, what's a differentiating factor? Well, I don't know if it's differentiating, but I do definitely let my personality shine. I'm unapologetic in what I'm passionate about. And I just think there's a space, that we can make this real estate game, if you will, fun. And what better way to do that inside the locker room?
I love it. Well, and you had mentioned that you're a high I on the DISC personality profile. So am I. Natural communicator, sometimes an oversharer, which is what my wife will call me at times. And, she's a high S, high C. I'm a high I, high S. So we share the S quadrant and we complement each other. And that, she makes sure that I don't run over the top of the mountain and realize there's a cliff on the other end. She's a little bit more strategic than I can be. And so she'll say every now and again that, hey, you're oversharing here or whatever. But I think in that desire to communicate, we're really being authentic and we're being vulnerable. And that's a way of connecting, right? Most people want to work with a coach who's been there, done that, has had the accolades, and that's why they come to you, but they don't want to be beaten over the head with that. They want to know that you've had struggles and you've had times that haven't worked out. And so let's talk about some of that, with your wife and kids, and you've moved around the country, and there's some different things that have happened for you over the past couple of years that I think are important to realize, that you come from this place of you haven't had it all figured out always, and you're constantly learning, as I am with my podcast audience, learning in tandem with the folks that I'm helping educate.
Yeah. I love sharing this, because I think by sharing this, Kyle, it liberates other people. It gives them permission to be okay with their faults, and imperfections. And so I'm no different than anybody else. I've never yet met a successful person who hasn't gone through a lot of crap, that's really, they chose to use it to define them, for the positives. And it's sometimes learning to embrace the suck. You just commit to the process, you embrace the suck. And it's in those moments where you're curled up in the fetal position and you're in the bathroom floor, man, where you just have had enough. And you make a decision once and for all, which side literally means to kill off. And so you kill off being average, you kill off mediocrity and complacency and all those things. And so for me, life is always a series of defining moments. And so one of mine dates most recently to about 2 or 3 years ago, when I was a complete fraud. On Facebook, I was putting it out there. All my friends thought I was successful. I had different job titles and leadership opportunities, but inside, I wasn't financially well off. I was behind in back taxes, $30,000, because I didn't know how to manage the money. My wife and I's relationship, let's say, was not the best. And I was being told that she had a roommate. And at the time, we had liquidated $45,000 of my IRA, or Roth IRA savings, 401k rather, I'm sorry. Her teacher's pension fund was right around that same amount, because we were moving around, all opportunity driven. We went from Illinois to North Carolina and South Carolina and now back home. And so we were living off that money. And next thing I knew, we had $8,000 in our name with a mountain of credit card debt and back taxes. I'm thinking, what the heck? And I'm tired of driving on the weekends by these lakes, because I'm a lake guy. And I see everybody zipping around on their boats, having a good time. I'm like, I'm done. Like, what do they have that I don't have? And it's just in that moment of decision that enough is enough. And you just change the course of your family's future in that moment. And it's really that simple. You just make a choice and you move forward. And so ever since then, life has looked very different. Mindset of abundance and the marriage and things like that are much better. But man, it's not without sacrifices and feeling very uncomfortable at times. And I think people just need to know, if you hear my voice right now, whatever you're going through, I once heard a mentor of mine say that you're anywhere you want to be within 5 years. So whatever you envision that perfect life looking like, you are anywhere within 5 years from achieving that. And we're living proof. I got to tell you this, man. So through 3 years ago, we just closed on my perfect dream home. That's like a cabin on a lake. I've obsessed about it for years. And we closed on that home in, I think, June of this past year, 2018. And I'm not kidding you. I don't know if anybody else checks their Facebook memories or like time hop, or it takes you back in time. The day before closing, I had made a Facebook post during this defining moment I'm telling you about that said, hey, Facebook world, in 3 years, I'm not kidding, 3 years, I'm going to own my perfect home on a lake in the mountains or whatever. And wouldn't you know, the next day I'm sitting at the closing table. Like, that's laws of attraction stuff right there. So anyways.
Well, it's a power of intentionality too. You've got law of attraction, but I think that what happens is that it gets a little bit confused for a lot of people, where they're like, I just need to think that this is going to happen. And I just read Think and Grow Rich, which was recommended to me by our good mutual friend, Brandon Green. And I read that a couple months ago here. And as you look at it, what ends up happening with the power of attraction is it's all of the steps in between that you actually don't think about that are really what gets you there. And I think what happens for a lot of people is they just think, okay, all I got to do is just think and then sit and like Publishers Clearinghouse or something. Like, it's going to just come to my door. There's going to be a big check because I thought it and I filled out the form. There we go. And there's a lot of work in it. And so I don't want to miss this step. What in the world did you do over the past couple of years once you realized that you were a phony? I mean, you self-described that. I'm not being mean to you. But when you said, hey, look, I am not acting in alignment here, what did you do? What were your next steps to rekindle your relationship with your wife? Obviously, take care of your finances. What were some of those things that you did so that if someone's hearing this, they can say, hey, I can do this too? What are some of the tactical steps?
Total checkup from the neck up right there. I think number one, just like anything, is admitting it, having the awareness that, oh my gosh, I'm not hallucinating anymore. I just have to interrogate reality. And do I like where I'm at or not? Because there's a quote out that says, vision without execution is just hallucination. So I was hallucinating a lot of that period of my time where I wanted my friends to think I was successful, but really inside we had nothing to show for it, man. So I'll give you you said something very practical. Something is simple. What I've found is daily habits and things like that are just simple, small things that we often take for granted or might be seemingly insignificant. So the compound effect, the power of habit, atomic habit, great books like that, which make you really reflect, were very powerful for me. Here's an example. I'm a workaholic. I love to work. I'm sure you do too. And a lot of people listening to this podcast do. I love to work.
When you find your passion, it's hard to realize that you are working. And I really think that that's the confusing part of it is, if you step back and say like, oh yeah, I guess the guys who work at the post office don't work 75 hours this week without asking for overtime. That's a kind of a normal thing in that industry. But when you find your passion, it's very slippery slope, because there are times you're like, man, this just doesn't even feel like working. And all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been late for dinner 3 times this week.
Totally.
So I think that's where we get mixed up as entrepreneurs, but keep going.
Yeah, no, it's good. I agree with you 100%. So one very small thing, guys, that I did was when my wife started to say things like she had a roommate, not a husband. You got to listen. Like, gentlemen, listen. All right. It's not worth it to destroy your marriage. And so what I did was I thought back just the little steps. I stopped taking my laptop home because I would chug away in bed with a laptop on my lap and just work until 2 a.m. And it's like, oh, hey, I see you over there. Work. And now, so I don't take my laptop home, because what that removed was temptation. Now I understand we still got our phones, but for me, that was the starting point of a massive behavioral change. And now, it's a matter of being intentional with the calendar. If it's not on your calendar, it does not exist. So it's a matter of scheduling the date nights, making time to be mentally present with your freaking children. Put the phone away. And so getting really clear of what's my priority in life, that's all I had to be reminded of. But it's hard, man. You got all these temptations and shiny objects coming your way, and a lot of us operate out of the fear of loss. If I don't check my phone, maybe I missed a call that was worth $6,000, or who knows what it is. But I tell you, I can't tell you who won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Your kids, your wife, or your spouse won't remember that deal you closed. They spell love the same way children do, which is T-I-M-E. They want to spend time with you where you're fully present. And so it was coming to grips with that. And from there, just making a lot of behavioral changes and being present in the moment. And I'm still working on it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, but that was the beginning of just acknowledging it and taking small action items that make a big difference.
Love everything you've said. And I will add something to it that is that's a practical tip that I've picked up from others. And it's not all that, earth shattering, but if you think about this intentionally, like the concept of the laptop, which I heard that and I was like, wow, that's important, because you know what? Leave the office, leave your work at the office. And the next step, the thing that I'm going to share is literally yesterday closed one of the biggest deals of our company's history. Fortunately, it was awesome experience. It was super gratifying for everybody involved, because I was the listing agent. Two of our top producers were the buyer's agents. So we got a chance to all work together on a deal, which was a lot of fun. So one of the things that I do with my family is we take a moment to celebrate those occasions, because so often they can become kind of like, boom, on to the next one. Like just kind of like it becomes not special. And I think that when you operate that way, things can become mechanical, and that's where you get burnt out. So I made one small adjustment last night as we were going out to dinner. And it was a special dinner for us, but it wasn't all that special of a place. We're going to PF Chang's. It was a lot of fun. As I was getting out of the car, I took my cell phone and I holstered it right in the middle console of my car, locked the car, and walked in. Mm-hmm. In that 1 hour, I didn't check my phone once. My Apple Watch, which is great, had no ability to give me the notifications because it was far enough away. And we had a wonderful conversation. Literally across from us and I don't know their story, and I know I'm judging because I have no idea what their story was, but there was an older kind of middle-aged gentleman, and what looked like could have been his daughter, his niece, his big brother, little sister type of, whatever the situation was. It was an older person and a younger person face to face, both of them on their phones the entire time. Both of them looking at it, and I didn't even know if they were exchanging any communication. It was like, that's horrible. You're gonna have this meaningful exchange, and who knows what it was, and I don't know what they were doing, but I could see the guy, and it was scrolling through whatever social media feed. And it's just, I think these things that we think about, it's like, oh, I want to have a better relationship with my family. I have had the situation where, unfortunately, in the past couple of years, I've had a bunch of clients die, just sicknesses and just different things, people that were really meaningful to me. And every single time I go to any of their funerals, the thing that they say for sure is that this person connected with me. They were intentional about my relationship with them. They always had time for me. No one ever said it was like, oh, dad had this amount of social media followers or whatever it was. No one cares about that type of stuff. And so I think when you're with your family, spend time with your family is the point.
The conversation is the relationship. If there's no conversation happening, you have no relationship. And if some of you hearing this right now, if this is resonating, Kyle, I don't know if you've read this book. I'm a quote junkie. I'm sorry, but not sorry. There's a great book you need to read now. This is mission critical, and it's the top 5 regrets of the dying. Nowhere in there do they care. These are literally people who were interviewed. I know this sounds morbid, but on their deathbed in a hospice. And this individual wrote a book on that, and it's the top 5 regrets of the dying. And
heard about this book.
Really puts perspective of what matters and all the other crap that we get hung up on every day.
Yeah, Jake, I've heard about that book and haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it is the things like personal relationships that they regret because someone had a falling out or whatever. And it's some of the obvious stuff, but you're hearing it from these people who know that they've got a limited amount of time left, and they know that the sand is trickling through the hourglass there at the very end. And it was, like you said, it was written by a nurse or someone in the health industry that worked in a hospice, and they just saw these recurring themes over and over again. And they felt compelled to do research behind it. And what a powerful, powerful message. You know, we talked about mistakes. We talked about failure. We talked about things that you've done personally. Now let's have you be a coach. Okay. So I often, and I know that I'm this way for sure, my success is standing on top of a mountain of failure. All these things that didn't go right. You talk about baseball. You know, if you're a 300 hitter, that means you're striking out or getting out 7 times out of 10. And at the same time, we celebrate those who hit and get on base 3 times out of 10, if you think about that math backwards and forwards. So what have you learned makes successful people able to get through failure faster? Or what are some things that you've observed that successful folks really work through failure in an intentional way?
Failure always precedes success. So like I said earlier, you embrace the suck before every, there's a breakdown before every breakthrough. I mean, I can quote you to death, but what I've seen the most successful people do is they are willing to reflect. They pause. They just reflect and say, here's the situation. I didn't like it. What's the outcome I wish would have happened? And moving forward, what can I do differently to increase the chances for my desired outcome? They reflect. It's learning and growing. There's no such thing as failure if you don't give up, right? And so it's just taking that moment. And I often, we say things like success leaves clues. Well, guess what? So does failure. And people have gone before you. There's a trail of breadcrumbs. Just pay attention to it and ask yourself powerful questions. Stop thinking in terms of trying to find all of the answers. And we're conditioned that way because growing up through the education system, we get gold stars and badges and rewards for having the right answers. And in school, we're fearful to raise our hand because we don't want to ask a stupid question. That is so backwards. And you had mentioned masterminds earlier. Masterminds are great, but I'm a bigger fan of question minds, where the rules of the game are you only get to participate through the art of asking questions. Stop trying to find the answers and challenge your mindset to think in the form of questions. So that's kind of one thing there. The other piece to that is commitment. Commitment to the process, right? Tony Robbins is the master at pain versus pleasure and stuff, where I can sit here and say that I want as many Olympic gold medals as Michael Phelps. But am I willing to spend 16 hours a day in that swimming pool like Michael Phelps did? Heck no. I don't want it that bad. He did. And so you have to make a commitment to what you're going to do. I can say I want $100,000 or whatever, $1 million, but unless you are crystal clear about the process and you're committed to the process, your audio is not going to match up with your video. And so it's for that. And I think two last points on this. This is a big topic, is around failure and all that. Second one is surrounding yourself with great people. You all need to have your own personal board of directors. That's how I choose to look at it. So when I'm in the crappy moments or I need to run any important decision, I surround myself with other like-minded high achievers that serve as essentially my board of directors, that I don't make any decisions without their influence or opinion. And then the last piece to that is obviously personal growth. If you're only feeding your mind with negative news stuff or reading, through social media feeds, you're screwed. You got to be listening and planting new things in your mind. I'm an audiobook guy, but if you read or whatever it is, personal growth, surrounding yourself with right people, and embracing the process would be the biggest things, anything related to failure, in my opinion.
Oh, I love all of that. And this is going to come from an ex-baseball guy also who's become a tremendous thought leader. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but the last podcast I listened to was of a talk by a guy named Ed Milet. I don't know if you know who Ed is.
I listened to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ed is just, sometimes it's an interview, sometimes it's a keynote speech, sometimes it's just a pep talk. And it's like a locker room pep talk. And his podcast is called Maxing Out. because he's a big workout guy, and he wasn't a big guy when he played baseball. And he really feels a lot of regret from not hitting the next level after college, because he was a highly sought after, highly recruited high school athlete into college. And then in college just kind of fizzled out and almost didn't graduate. And you can check out his podcast. But one of the things that Ed Milet shared in his last podcast that I listened to was that your first hour of the day is yours, and whatever you decide to do with it is your choice. And oftentimes people allow other things to dictate what that first hour means for them, i.e. news, i.e. social media, i.e. whatever it is that's dinging and whizzing and whatever it is on your phone. I mean, those types of things. And so I've made this intentional practice, and I always thought it was kind of weird, but now that I'm hearing this and hearing it's more intentional, I've made this intentional practice of trying to avoid using my phone in the first hour, whether it's writing something, reading, praying, thoughtful reflection, whatever that is, going on a walk with my dog. I do like my podcast when I go on my walk, but just trying not to immediately be immersed in whatever people are pushing at you, I think is the important part there.
You immediately react to the day. I mean, most people roll over, they grab their phone, they start scrolling through the social media instead of even thinking about, what are my goals for the day? What do I want to journal about? What am I grateful for? We immediately fall victim and react all day long instead of being proactive to the day.
Yeah. And so some people go, well, you know what, gosh, my iPhone is my alarm clock. Well, one of the things you can do, and I have found this to be very true, is start going to bed a little bit earlier, and all of a sudden you may not need your alarm clock. But Brian Buffini, the famous real estate coach, also talks about get yourself an old-fashioned alarm clock. I literally holster up my phone downstairs. It's in the basement. My wife's not that way. She, the high C, she wants to be able to have it there for safety and security. And I get that. I totally get it. But my phone is a work tool. And so what I do is it's holstered up. It's in the charger. It's 2 levels beneath me in the basement of my house. And I go down there really to once I'm ready for the day. Once I've done my reflection, once I've done whatever, because then it doesn't become this like extension of you. It's a tool, and man has had tools for eons, and it's a tool that will end up getting replaced by something else at some point. So I love it. Love this discussion. So memorable and impactful experiences in your career are things that I love to just talk about, talk with thought leaders about, and people who've succeeded at a high level. So what are some things for you that have just been kind of these memorable or mountaintop experiences that you've had?
Well, I'm going to take 2 approaches. One is kind of a defining moment. So it's not like a mountaintop experience, but it's an influential experience nevertheless. And so to some, I've shared the story a ton of times, and it's insignificant perhaps to a lot of people, but it wasn't for me. So it was actually my sophomore year of high school, back to the baseball thing for a second. Sophomore year of high school, it was a playoff baseball game. Typical Midwest storm blows in. It's the 2nd inning, lightning, you name it. So the umpires postponed the game. They called it off. It's done. And so our coach was ranting and raving about all of us getting all the equipment up and running into the gymnasium. So we got out of the storm. So now that we're in the gymnasium, he sits us down. He's chewing us out, pointing and ranting and raving about all these things. And he gets into my face in front of all my teammates. And he knew my aspirations to play college and professional baseball. Now, mind you, I went to a high school of 200 people in the total high school. I'm from a town of 700 people in the sticks and cornfields of Illinois. So like, dude, nobody did anything athletically. You're a farmer, okay? And so the odds were not with me, but he pointed in my face and he said, none of you will ever see the inside of a college or professional stadium unless you buy a ticket. Verbatim, those were his words. I remember it like it was yesterday. And so I'm sharing that with everybody because for me, that was a defining moment. And I've shared that at athletic banquets and different speeches I've had, whereas the gift was, haha, na boo boo, I saw some pretty cool stadiums. But it didn't stop there. And I realized that a couple years ago when I was listening to an audio book called The Storyteller's Secret, all about like TED Talks and things. And it was all about sharing your story. I'm like, holy crap. That's what that gift was inside of that day. That lit the flame inside of me, never to be that person to, rain on somebody else's parade or their goals and visions. So now that's just, man, I get so passionate about supporting another person's goals and working through what it takes to get there, because we all have. My story is not special than the next, but for me, that's what it speaks to. And so I just want to share that. Most recently, though, as far as standing on top of the mountain kind of experience, we do twice a year, we have what we call coaches retreats inside the locker room. So this is where all the coaches fly in, and our first retreat took place in the fall of 2017, not that long ago. And that for me was one of the most special times because we had a group of people with a common mission. We'd never met each other before, but we showed up in the mountains of North Carolina and said, oh, hello, now we're best friends. And what came out of that was significance. I'd be lying if I didn't say the first year or two of my career wasn't spent trying to be a success. It's all about me and the accolades and the money and the recognition. And for me, walking out of that 2.5-day event, I now knew I was living a life of significance, and it's not about me. It's about serving other people and creating this platform that can impact what's now thousands of folks with their own goals and dreams. So that was one thing that really stood out to me when you and I were talking in the pre-interview of what I wanted to share, I guess. Yeah.
Love that. Gosh. And it reminds me, very similar example where you talk about the coach kind of challenging everybody and also saying, hey, you guys are a bunch of nobodies. I remember a defining moment in my career. So I had shared that I played baseball. Baseball was my first love up until about 10th grade, and I became relegated to being my best friend's pinch runner. My best friend was the catcher, great hitter, just a total dirtbag, just a great guy. We are still friends to this day. We get breakfast once a month. He's on my board of directors. He has nothing to do with my business, but is someone that can speak to me in different ways than other people can. So what I share though is that once I became relegated to becoming the pinch runner, I'm like, baseball's probably not for me anymore. I stopped focusing on the fundamentals, and I was living off of talent, and other people were surpassing me. So I went back to my other spring sport that I would play, which is lacrosse. And in lacrosse, my senior year, I played baseball and lacrosse throughout growing up at the same time. And my senior year of high school, we were in a pretty big, high-profile regular season game. It would end up defining the rest of our season, which we went to the state championship. We lost in overtime by 1 goal. I was on the field. Not that I remember it to this day, but just one of those things where it's like, man, you're almost there. But the point is, we had a crushing loss at what was my future wife's high school. So I went to a different high school than my wife across town, pretty close. It was a big rivalry. I was pumped up because all of her friends were going to be there, and we got crushed. And this was the preeminent program. And we just thought we were really good. We were on a roll. And I remember just being ticked off, being upset, and we're all kind of huddled up in this spot here. And my coach was kind of like trying to say, like, guys, I don't know if this is going to work out for you. And I remember telling everybody that I love this season too much to let us play that way again. And it's interesting, at the awards banquet at the end, I said other things too, I'm sure. We were all just sitting down. It wasn't like I stood up and did some big Braveheart moment or something. I was just sitting there, just kind of sharing from my heart. I ended up getting the motivation award for my team. We had a couple of awards. We had kind of like the captain's award, most valuable player, most improved, and then there was this like motivational player award. And I got that. It was the second year in a row, but it was the only year I was on varsity. I got it with JV, and I didn't feel like that was as big of a deal. And that moment was a defining moment for me because it made me realize that I could connect and motivate people. And I thought it was just like me being ticked off and wanting to do better, and everybody else that kind of lifted everybody up. And I think these moments in our life, people underestimate these defining moments. That coach that is just trying to kind of like agitate you, and you're like, you know what, man, you're wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong. Those are defining moments. And I think you need to pay attention to those. I've had several guests talk about this when people were looking for their purpose or their calling is, think about the things that you loved to do when you were 7. There's some truth to that. There's some truth to the things that you love to do. So I loved your answer, and it just related a lot to me and reminded me of that story as we were talking about it. So final question. But before my final question, I'm going to do your baseball guy. I'm going to throw you a curveball. All right.
Oh, bring it.
All right. So curveball, and I think this is going to share a lot for our baseball junkies of who you are, but give me 2 of your favorite baseball players. When you're growing up, the guys that you admired or whatever, like who are your guys?
Man, that's easy. So Nolan Ryan, hands down, Nolan Ryan, and then Ken Griffey Jr.
Nice. Backwards hat, just hitting home runs like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was easy.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So for you, just to know me a little bit better, mine was Cal Ripken Jr. I
Solid.
grew up in Baltimore, and I'm a big proponent of showing up to work every day, diligence. He was the guy who broke Lou Gehrig's consecutive games streak, and so Cal Ripken Jr. was the hometown guy, but also just this steady Eddie and real important for me. All right, so final question, and this is framed in a couple of different ways. You can take it a couple of different ways, but our podcast audience knows I always ask it. It's this idea of "Dear Younger Me," which is a Christian song. It's actually a song that's basically placed with, hey, if you had the ability to live it all over again, if you could write yourself a letter, "Dear Younger Me," what would you say? And it's kind of funny, the answers that we get to this question oftentimes are, I'm not sure I do things all that differently because it got me to where I am today, you know? But it's the way that I frame this question is it's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. So if you're coaching someone that's 22 years old or 23 years old, and you're thinking back on your life, on how things could have worked out maybe differently, or defining moments, as we've been talking about, what are some things that you would share with that 22 or 23-year-old that you're coaching?
I love that question. Okay, so this might come out in some jumbled thoughts here, but I'll do my best. So I would say, first of all, if it's not important to you, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not important to you, you're going to find an excuse. So which is it? Make a decision, but none of this wishy-washy stuff. Second of all, though, and I think take this one to the bank as my answer, would be drowning out the noise and letting the haters become your motivators. I really have learned to play with a chip on my shoulder, I guess. And not, I don't know, I'm not calling anybody out, but I like to play with a chip on my shoulder and always have something to prove or some cause I'm fighting for or something, because if you live your life by trying to do what's popular or the consensus of other people, you're going to be average. And I say that with all due respect. I think people listening to this podcast are probably all high-minded, high achievers, and that's why they're following you. And so it's just drowning out the noise and knowing that do whatever you feel is right for you. Stay in alignment with yourself. Stay true and authentic to who you are, what your vision and purpose for yourself in this world is, and just know that that's going to come under criticism, 22-year-old Jake. And if you try to live your life according to the opinion of others, I think you're going to end up average because you're not following your heart and your passion and what you feel God put you on this earth to really do. And so that's probably what the biggest advice I would give to younger Jake is accept it, embrace the criticism and use that to fuel you, not getting hung up in, oh my God, I can't believe they said that about me. Who cares? I mean, who really cares? So last thing I would probably say is just go dominate and disrupt. Just be a disruptor. I know that's an overused word these days, but dominate and disrupt, because if you take on an attitude of domination, the word competition doesn't show up in your language anymore. There is no such thing as competition if you just go crush and dominate your space, whatever that is, however big that is. Because if you don't just play the game, but change the way the game is played, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
The way that I like to say it, that's a little bit different than disruption, is create some ruckus. And I think for folks that are out there that are feeling like maybe that word is a little bit overplayed, I like the idea of ruckus, and just because people are going to start talking about you because you're making waves in a positive way. And I loved your answer. This has been a wonderful opportunity to connect. We've never met before, Jake, but I feel like we know each other far better. I hope we have a chance to meet at some point. And I got a shout out to Wayne Salmons for introducing us. Wayne was our guest 2 episodes ago and said, you really need to connect with Jake. Now, this is a little bit extra credit here, but you and Wayne are kind of competitors, but you have framed this, what do you call it, a board of directors or mastery group. The two of you connect intentionally with another person, and you shared that with me. What are some of the things, without getting super specific, that you talk about with people that you respect, like Wayne?
Yeah, my quest is to figure out what questions that they ask. I'm just on this question kick right now. So a lot of our Tuesday morning phone calls that I have every week with Wayne and a couple other gentlemen are all around how we can show up in our best authentic self and serve other people, kind of put the oxygen mask on yourself first kind of thing. And then really what thought-provoking questions we can ask those that we're here on this planet Earth to serve. because it really challenges people's mindsets. And a lot of people have different definitions of leadership, but I believe one of them is getting people to think differently, helping them think so they get what they want when they want it, and not just telling them what to do, but it's getting them to think. And so through the form of questions is really a lot of our topic and focus as coaches who, by any argument, are competitors, but we live in this abundant world, and we see it as just a group of 4 dudes getting together each week trying to make each other better. And we refer each other out and don't have any limiting beliefs around that.
I love that, because it's true. There's enough out there for all of us to eat, be fed. The best analogy I've ever heard of this abundant mindset is that most people think of the world as a pie. And you've shared some time in Illinois. I've got some family they're distant family, Lou Malnati's, that, they make pizza pies. These are not just little thin crust. It's like a thick crust if you've been in Illinois pizza. And most people think, I want to get my slice of the pie, or how can I make my market share bigger? And the best analogy I've ever heard of an abundant lifestyle is if you've ever been, unfortunately, to a vigil where someone passes away, or if you've ever been to a Christmas Eve service at a Christian church, you'll know what candle lighting is all about. It's one spark, one light lights the entire room. And the coolest thing ever at our church is there'd be 1,200 people in this room. It's completely dark as the fire department will allow it be. And the pastor has the one flame. And all of a sudden you light, and all of a sudden you can see the room become more and more illuminated. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. We're not taking from each other. We're adding to each other. I love it.
I love that. Yeah. Last comment is our mutual friend, Hank. He says it best, and I don't know if he got it from somewhere else, but it stuck with me the way he said it. For me to win doesn't mean somebody else has to lose.
Right.
And that just stuck with me, man. And that's what it really means in a nutshell, to think and live abundantly.
Yeah, love it. Well, Jake Dixon, this has been so much fun. How do people check out the Locker Room on social and or the web? What's the way that they connect with your group?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So check us out on Facebook. I mean, we have all the social media, Instagram, Facebook, the Locker Room Real Estate Coaching, the Locker Room Nation on Instagram. Check us out on there. Awesome. Anybody can email me, lockerroomcoaching@gmail.com, and it will be me who responds.
I love it. Well, for our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, who set up this interview, for Wayne Salmons, who introduced us, Jake Dixon, I really appreciate this time together with you. I'm Kyle Malnati, and for all of you that love our podcast, please rate it, review it, give it a 5-star review. We are almost at 25-star reviews, and that's going to be a day of celebration for me. And if you like us on Facebook, if you like us on Instagram, we would definitely appreciate that as well. And thanks for the subscribe. Thanks for the listen. For Kyle, for all of the podcast audience out there, I'm Kyle Malnati, and we will see you around the neighborhood. Bye, everybody. Thank you.